Okay.
Environment and law. Woo!
I should have paid more attention to
Everything.
the World's Grand Final and remembered the arguments. Okay, shall we take a couple minutes?
Take a couple of minutes and figure out life, yeah.
I'm happy to chat only because
I think we need to, because I can think of like 3 points and I'm fairly sure OG will say them. So yeah, let's start.
I feel like an analytical extension maybe on the cards.
Weighing. We'll do so much weighing. It'll be great. Cool. I think the obvious things are that ultimately environmental crimes are a problem because they often impact the people who did not commit them, i.e. most polluted countries are often not the ones creating that pollution. So like Norway in Europe doesn't do anything wrong, but they just get all of the crap from Europe. Look, I think this argument can be made on both sides, and I think it'll just come down who does it better. I think law can be used as either a balance of power or an imbalance of power. Obviously, we have to say it's a balance of power. I think the framing for that is that this is either a class action suit or a case against a state or a case against a major company, right? Like for it to make any sense, meaning you only need the legal knowledge from, say, like one very good lawyer or one very good firm to be able to make a major impact versus the alternatives, which are like state on state opt-in agreements or like the UN, which just don't work because there's no enforcing power or enforcing mechanism.
Yep. I agree with all that. I think what I was thinking is that there might be a lot of kind of it's kind of a rebuttal extension, but I think it proves an important burden in the debate, which is like why the status quo is insufficient. So why is it not sufficient that you can just help fund a lawsuit that has jurisdiction? Maybe one reason might be because you want a degree of control over it, so you're reluctant to fund suits that you're not like necessarily a part of. Not the best reason, but a
BP
thought.
reason.
It's a reason. And what might be another barrier is like, well, I mean, I guess it's just finding like actually having standing is just like kind of difficult, right? Like you have to prove that you were directly affected, like, and you know, depending on your movements at the time, like a whole bunch of other factors like that.
They also have to like recognize your court or recognize like the reason the US just gets away with everything is they say they don't recognize like the ICC, or like I know it's not the ICC, but like on that level. Like, look, I think the strongest up here is that this will be used by wealthy nations to fuck over the poorest nations, who very often do commit crimes against the environment as a source of development. That is the strongest op. I think a couple of things. I think there's probably less incentive for them to do that insofar as they're not likely to get any major benefit out of it. So like the West actually, whilst we want to like poo-poo like people around the world fucking up the environment, it is the West that benefits from that insofar as they mess up their environment to sell us stuff cheaply. So it's actually less likely that the US is going to sue somebody else insofar as getting money out of them or anything like that, or caring about the environment. I think this is more likely that the state of Bangladesh can probably sue the world for like them eradicating their coastline. And
I think another maybe op push is like the whole, I guess, the fundamental flaw with international law, right, which is that you just don't have to abide by it. Like most international court of justice rulings that indeed get applied to the US tend to get later vetoed by them. Like, you know, when it comes to enforcement in like the Security Council or whatever. I don't know exactly. I know that's how it works when it comes to like, I just remember the ICG case where it was the US and Nicaragua, and then the US vetoed it in the Security Council or something. I don't know if the same applies to environmental crimes, but presumably even where like there's some way around it, presumably the benefit is just still strong signaling that the court has found against X party. Which means that there's like more awareness brought to the issue, and secondly, probably greater like third party kind of, I don't know, like if there's like now a lot of ick around a certain environmental practice, less investors might want to opt in. So I think just the media and the awareness that follows from these court cases are useful, even if they don't end up having enforcement mechanisms.
Yeah, because I think a lot of the like modern crimes are either, so in countries where they don't have like say a strong legal framework, it's because necessarily they don't know or nobody's enforcing it. Or say if it's in the US or in China, it's because their states will turn a blind eye, meaning they can get away with it. So even if nothing actually gets enforced, even if it signals that less people are willing to take the risk of committing like the worst crimes.
Oh, true. Yep. Good. Yeah. Deterrence. Classic.
Deterrence and risk. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. I'm just thinking if there are any like other fun creative uses of universal jurisdiction.
By the environment, we actually mean Mother Nature, and that's a woman. So I think that women won't know.
Checkmate up.
Yeah. Why don't you want women to be able to get reparations? Huh?
Such educational content.
Such education. Hi guys, hope you're enjoying this fun content. This says wood. Like, okay, I know this is really basic, but who is like, I know we don't necessarily have to, and we're not OG, but like, who is this house? Like, just like, it's just everybody is agreeing to this, I assume.
I assume this is like international courts, the International Court of Justice probably changing its mandate in the way that allows cases to come before it.
And because like there is an element of good fiat, we do get to assume that like the US can't just be like, no.
So I think what I think we have to, so what I think OP have to cop is that this change happens. Like the US can't bully the ICJ out of doing this, but insofar as the ICJ does rule against them, they can then try to weasel out of the ruling, if that makes sense.
Or they can just like countersue or like,
So I think we have to then contest like why that is less likely or less important. But I think insofar as the like, you know, countries being able to do this in the first place is like OP have to cop that for sure.
I think on the balancing of power thing as well, like I think a lot of the say poorer countries or weaker countries that op are gonna like they're gonna get screwed. They're already kind of heavily screwed, either because A, they don't have the money to defend themselves from the environment, so they are less likely to continue doing it. But also like to get things like development loans and development aid and all these things. Like the World Bank is starting to look at how drastically you're fucking up the environment before giving people development loans. So like, yeah, I think this is going to, if CG are going to win this debate, it's going to be on being really clear on what the comparative is and that this is slightly better than status quo.
Yeah. Maybe let's like return to the principle for a sec, because I'm just trying to think of like, are there any other kind of examples to support this? Like I think OG will probably take this, but so the pollution kind of makes sense. Like I guess OP might say, but if the pollution crosses your borders, therefore you have standing. But I think like a lot of the time that would be fairly nebulous, right?
It's also incredibly hard to prove, right? Like
it might be also an indirect effect, right? Like I don't know, for example, the pollution kind of crosses over in a way that is like quite small but might still deter, for example, like some form of investment because of that perceived risk or something.
Or just like causes a pretty great cost to the state to resolve the issue, right? Like
yeah. I guess just like, I don't know, as far as actually, what is a crime against the environment? I feel like that's another useful question at this point, because it's not just like
this is the point actually.
Because I'm just thinking, right, if insofar as these actions are things that are legally permissible, is it a crime against the environment, right? So I guess these would be things that would be like defined already in international law as crimes against the environment. So like, I don't know.
But I also just think that like at the point where this motion is a thing, there becomes a lot clearer regulation and clearer coded lines on what that law looks like. So I think at the moment we can probably say like, you know, like mass flat plain mining, or like China refusing to resolve the pollution from the Three Gorges Dam, or like all of that stuff is notably a crime against the environment because they are already breaking legislation when doing it. But I think like having a court that has like universal jurisdiction means that countries that are more like legally advanced when it comes to environmental law, they can develop and impose those laws across the world now. Because like I would say like Norway probably has far more laws about the environment than like most of the world. Because they're actually good to their environment.
I have a question. What would be our stance be in situations where, let's say, Brazil is fucking up its own rainforest, right? That's its own territory, presumably.
Yeah.
Could another country sue them for that? Given
I think so. It's in defense A of the wider environment and B a defense of the Brazilian people who very often don't want it.
Yeah.
Like in the same way you intervene for like genocidal crimes or like war crimes, this is still removing someone's habitat and means of living. So it's fairly, that's a principle. Environmental crimes are akin to maybe not genocide, but war crimes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking there are like so many clear-cut cases. There are so many cases where like, you know, indigenous tribes are probably not going to mount a legal suit, right? Pretty big because the threat from the state to them is just so significant. So
/ like it's just a lot of money to go up against a state or a corporation.
Yeah. So to be honest, I'm kind of happy to wear the burden that this might occasionally occur, like in terms of, like, I think most of the time this is holding developed countries accountable. I think sometimes this will be holding developing countries accountable, but I think as far as that is concerned, it'll be done in a way that's like fair. There are lots of strong international norms that will kind of guide this.
Yeah, but I think we can just say that in that defense, it's the state or the companies that are being sued, not the people, meaning it's like it's probably not breaking like as many laws if it's provable that on balance the state needed to do this type of thing, whereas like the Amazon rainforest, they are just ripping people's homes away from them for very little reason other than money.
Okay, so in summary, look, I mean, we'll see how OG goes. I feel like it'll probably just be like clarifying a lot, maybe like proving why alternatives are insufficient. Happy to run the principle they don't. Maybe just some further impacting.
Hopefully it'll do a somewhat decent job, and then we can be like, okay, here's why you're wrong, and also if the things you're saying are correct, here's why we're still better. Cool.
All right, I think that's time.
Just message me when you have any idea what the vague things you're going to say are. But other than that,
I think you can stop the recording as well.
Will do.